Hello and welcome. I'm Amritan Shura and you're watching Law of the Land on Sabha TV. Today we bring to you the Supreme Court judgment on forest conservation, and we will also talk about the existing forest conservation law. To discuss the issue, I have with me Mr. Sanjay Parekh, advocate in the Supreme Court, and Mr. R. Sridhar, chairperson, Mine, Minerals and People and Alliance of Affected People. Now for the headlines. The Forest Conservation Act provides for maximum penalty of imprisonment up to 15 days only for destruction of forest. The Supreme Court's landmark judgment on forest conservation led to the creation of Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority, CAMPA. CAMPA is now the nodal agency for handling funds for reforestation and forest conservation activities. The principal law to prevent deforestation is the Forest Conservation Act. The maximum penalty that the law provides is imprisonment for 15 days if a person is caught indulging in deforestation activity without the approval of the central government.
India has been witnessing a rising demand for forest-based products. According to the Forest Survey report of the Ministry of Environment and Forest, about 36,700 hectares of forest land was lost to deforestation between 2009 and 2011. As of now, forest cover in India is over 78 million hectares, which is 23% of the geographical area. Use of wood for fuel alone accounts for 58 million tons every year for both domestic and commercial purposes. Bamboo, a non-wood product, is widely used for commercial purposes. Expansion of agriculture, shifting cultivation, timber harvesting and extension of cultivation on hill slopes have been a major reason for deforestation.
Companies take into account just their area, right? And in their area, actually, they are going to clear off the forest. That's why they want license. And their protection activity, except for some green belt or issues of that kind, rest of it is now put onto the shoulder of the CAMPA or the Forest Department through the CAMPA.
Let's look at the main provisions of the Forest Conservation Act, which is the sole guardian of the Indian forest. The Act provides for a committee which will advise the government as to who should be granted approval for activity in forest. It states that no forest land can be used for a non-forest activity without the prior approval of the central government. The law restricts assignment of forest land to private person. According to the Act, activities like mining, cultivation of tea, coffee, spices, rubber, palms, oil-bearing plants, horticulture crops or medicinal plants and any process other than reforestation is a non-forest purpose. But the penalty provided under the law is hardly a deterrent, as it is simple imprisonment for 15 days. In a situation where the officer of the government is involved in violation of the Forest Act, even he will be meted out of the same penalty.
Under the Forest Department, we have seen the maximum amount of timber as well as other smuggling that is involved. On the contrast, the Forest Conservation Act has been historically used by the Forest Department to actually put the communities who have been original stakeholders and protectors of this forest or conservators of this forest into the culprit box, and actually 90% of the cases are filed against the communities, including Dalits and Adivasis who are traditional forest dwellers.
The Ministry of Environment and Forest has constituted a committee to monitor the implementation of the Forest Conservation Act. According to the rules, a forest officer not below the rank of a conservator of forest is allowed to file a complaint in the court against an individual or any organization if he believes violation of law has taken place.
Indian forests are traditionally protected by voluntarily activists and those businessmen who traditionally depend on the forest land, who actually belong to the communities who live in the forest land. But when we allowed multinational companies, this focus has been shifted from the localites to the MNCs. That is why we are lagging behind the protection of this forest land. With Amit Rathore, Raj Kamal for Sabha TV.
Non-forest purpose means the breaking up or clearing of any forest land or portion of it. My question to you, sir, is you've seen the Act, how it stands. That's the pith and substance of the Act and the penalty provided. Do you think that's sufficient to actually tackle the big concern of conservation of forest?
See, let me tell you, as far as forests are concerned, lakes, ponds, rivers are concerned, the natural
ecosystems.
Yes, nature's bounty. Conservation means you have to conserve it, isn't it? Now the penalty which has been, I am not going to penalty part, what I probably should make my comment at the outset. The conservation means the forest conservation for the purpose of the present and future generation, the intergeneration equity principle has to be applied. There should not be any diversion of the forest because human beings cannot create forest. Like human beings cannot create water or rivers or whatever. In thousands of years, a forest is created. Now, I fail to understand this CAMPA and diversion of forest area because according to me, this has converted the Forest Conversion Act into Forest Diversion Act.
We'll come to CAMPA in the second segment, sir.
Because the question is that you keep on diverting my... But one point I can make here is that the entire emphasis of the Act should change now. With the growing population, with the receding of natural resources, there is a need to conserve the forests, and there is no need, like you say, there is a provision that with prior permission can be diverted. That should be in rarest of rare cases. Let me make that point clear, then we'll go to other provisions.
Sir, I'll bring you in. 23% is the coverage area of forests in the entire India. Do you think that's enough? And what, if not, what should be the minimum threshold of forest cover in India?
See, as early as 1950, they said, about 33% of India must be forest, right? Now, this 23% that is now 24% that is being touted today is also a very doubtful figure because now it includes, like your coffee plantation to tea plantation to everything that is
anything that is green.
That is green is now brought into the forest area by the government. So, in reality, it will be probably around 14-15%, and only about 8-9% of it would be forests, real good forests. My concern is, this overall 33% is good, but we have ecosystems in India where you need, a huge part of it has to be, under forest cover. For instance, the Himalayas. In the Himalayas, if we don't have, 60-70% forest cover, we cannot store water.
Right.
So the whole idea of conservation is not there. It is only a Forest Regulation Act or a Forest Diversion Act, as sir is calling.
Right.
But it is not a conservation act to conserve forests and to hold it back.
What is the reason that we as a country have still allowed allowed forests to be used for non-forest activities with approval? Is there a purpose behind it?
Let me tell you one amendment I can make is that because of the judgment, I am just pointing out that whatever diversion takes place, even that is calculated towards forest area. So suppose for a hydel project you are diverting say few hectares of forest area. They say they are going to have compensatory afforestation, therefore they count within the forest area. So therefore the actual coverage, if you look at it, is maybe 10%. 10% we can say, not even 13%. And the real forest area will be 7 or 8% as we call it. Now I fail to understand, see what is happening is that there is a lot of pressure on because of land acquisition on the plain area. Because of so many activities, it is increasing. And as a matter of fact, that's the reason why more and more, even for the purpose of resettlement, rehabilitation and so many other activities, pressure is being put on the hilly area, which is very, very bad.
Unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
The point I wanted to get from you is, see, he said very clearly in one of his interviews, it came out very clearly that giving rights to the locals, will that help in conservation of forest, or keeping them out of the entire forest will ensure conservation of forest?
See, one is there is this whole myth that's created about this Forest Rights Act. There is no new land that is being actually given. You see, these are areas where they have been using, cultivating, but they do not have a recorded right. Right. So, in a sense, we are not going to actually take away forests and hand it over to the tribals. A lot of people try and put it as such, saying that the Forest Rights Act is now encroaching upon conservation, and but that's not the fact. The fact is that you are giving only to people who have been already there, who have been using it, who have had rights already, but you are recognizing it and formalizing it. The fact is that unless you make them feel own the forest, right, I don't think you will get any participation. I'll give you an example. The one panchayats in the Himalayas, in Uttarakhand, it's a unique one which people fought and got in the 30s. Now, there are 8,000 one panchayats which are well functioning, and each one panchayat has at least 4 or 5 people who are working for it free of cost. So actually there are 40,000 or 50,000 people who are
involved in the
whole process, who are the communities who are managing it. So neither the government can provide such kind of a staff to take care of this, and if it is not allowing local communities to take charge of it, then we will have chaos only as we are having today.
On that note, it's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will talk about the powers of CAMPA. Welcome back. The Supreme Court judgment on forest conservation issue led to the creation of an agency known as Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority, CAMPA. This agency was empowered by the Apex Court to manage money collected from entities that are approved to use forest land for non-forest use. CAMPA now can fund reforestation and other conservation activity.
There is a provision in the Forest Conservation Act to allow forest land for non-forest use with government's approval. This led to serious issues of land valuation and environment. The question was, what price should the entity pay to the government for the use of forest land? How should the money be used? And what happens to concerns over environment? The gap was filled by Supreme Court judgment, which led to formation of a Compensatory Afforestation Fund Management and Planning Authority, CAMPA.
Once they have formed an authority and state agencies, they have left it to the state agencies, and periodically there is some evaluation done by independent, so-called independent experts who are appointed by the CAMPA authority itself, right? So like few of them which I have had an occasion to see, a huge amount of funds have so far gone into building their buildings, doing all other kind of infrastructure things, and very little has actually gone into doing something with the forest.
According to the judgment, which is now the law, the money collected through allowing non-forest use of jungles should be spent in creating forests of similar nature and provide employment to the local residents depend on forest land. Court also laid down guidelines for compulsory afforestation. The Apex Court gave legal validity to all the payments made to CAMPA. The court said that CAMPA will be authorized body of a Special Secretary from Ministry of Environment and Forest as a chairperson, and Director General of Forests, 2 additional DGs from Wildlife and Ecology departments as members. The court directed that CAMPA will have the right to hire staff on contractual basis or on deputation to execute financial transactions. CAMPA will be allowed to invest the funds of government in securities. The money received as payments from entities should be used for natural assisted regeneration, forest management, protection, infrastructure development, wildlife protection and management. CAMPA is also authorized to establish special purpose vehicles SPV for undertaking compulsory afforestation, and it can also consider evolving new mechanism to generate additional source of fund for forest conservation.
Today, forest clearance has become the biggest joke in this country. Forest clearance has become like in Himachal. I'll show you cases where they have said the companies have accepted that for jungle jo katna hai, wherever they have removed the forest, they remove the forest and pay the fine to the forest department. They just remove it. They just unilaterally go ahead taking off this forest, pay a fine to the MOEF and forest department. Clearing out forests has become as easy as this now.
But the valuation of forest land continues to create problems as there is no way to ascertain the price of land in different areas. According to the judgment, the government had to constitute an expert committee. This expert committee will be responsible for identifying and defining scientific biometric parameters to estimate values of forest land.
If we look at the Forest Survey of India's recent reports, the statistics on afforestation activities taking place in this country will disappoint us. The reason is CAMPA fund allotted to these kind of activities has not been utilized by state governments. It is high time for the central government to involve and interfere in these matters and protect the forests which are disappearing from the forest lands. With Amit Rathore, Rajkamal, Rajya Sabha TV.
The government is empowered to make rules under the Forest Conservation Act for conservation activity. My question to you first is, as of now, how much of fund is there with CAMPA? Do you have any idea?
I believe somewhere close to about 30,000 rupees, 30,000 crores.
30,000 crore rupees is with CAMPA. And it is clearly laid out how it has to be spent. You also said in the entire story that that is not how it is being spent. The first part of the money is going into infrastructure creation for office buildings and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, it's a pretty old judgment. This CAMPA authority, this authority has already been established and it's been about 7 years now. Now, given that, do you think we need to really move into conservation activity fast, and how can that be done?
Yeah. See, we need to move into conservation activity. There is no questions about it. But in trying to go into conservation activities, one is we need to understand what is the kind of ecosystems we are losing now, right? So what is happening, for instance, even before this CAMPA, compensatory afforestation for the Terry Dam actually occurred in Lalitpur and Jhansi districts, saying that there was no land there. So, in a sense, you are creating, disbalances of the kind that, was not naturally there. The other thing is, what are those, we are not able to say that, even the 1% that we are saying is inviolate for tiger sanctuaries, don't seem to be inviolate when, forest, clearance has to be, diversion has to be done. For instance, there are many mines which are, adjoining tiger parks or something where the tiger park is carved out, leaving aside the mine. Even in the case of Panna, right? So we have to get in, head on into, conservation activities, and I think we need to do a lot. But unfortunately, if you look at all the record statistics of what the forest department, which is supposed to handle this also, has been planting over the years, India must have been, revegetated some 6 times, So we don't know, what kind of focus, attention that is going to be there, and particularly I think there is a huge, decimation of forest that's happening now in central India, and I don't know how we are going to stop that.
Is there a will to stop this? Do you think there is a will with the government, or the government is in any way trying to be proactive? Even the Environment Ministry, the nodal agency, do you see any kind of a move, attempt, or will by the government, the legislation, to somehow ensure that they are protected? And if we go by the figures that have been provided by you, 8 to 9% forest cover is all that we have left. The touted 23%, according to you, is a blown out figure, just as it happened in the tiger conservation thing, where the numbers of the tigers was bloated up.
See, let me tell you, we look at the Supreme Court judgment first. It talks about the public trust doctrine and intergeneration equity. The meaning of that is conservation of forest area. Now, what happens is to the contrary. What they say is that no, because the Conservation Act provides for prior approval and a diversion, we will make now a accounting process for this diversion. And accounting process is that you pay 5 to 9 lakhs per hectares and divert any amount of area taken out from the forest area, but ultimately counted in the forest area. So that is the mechanism which has been evolved, which is according to me contrary to the public trust doctrine and intergeneration equity and Article 21, which they themselves said in the judgment. Now, saying that, in the forest clearances which are granted, unlike EIA, there is no hearing which is given. So suppose there are forest dwellers, they are actually integral part. This is a symbiotic relationship between those who live there and the forest. Their rights are not decided. They are treated as trespassers later on, whereas the project comes up after the clearance. These people ultimately suffer, and as you are saying, that the penalty is levied on these poor people. If there is a will today, according to me, what should be done is to immediately stop, because people who have money, if they can seek diversion of the forest, that is contrary to the forest conservation principle itself. This compensatory afforestation is like your water, rainwater harvesting. It cannot really give us water. It cannot actually bring in the forest by this kind of artificial process. It should, we should stop somewhere, I think, and say the commitment should be for conservation of forest and have a list that we are not going to tinker with this forest at all, at any rate.
On that note, it's time for us to head into a break. When we come back, we will show you an interview with Chairman Wildlife Trust of India, Mr. M.K. Ranjit Singh. Welcome back. My colleague Raj Kamal Rao spoke to Mr. M.K. Ranjit Singh, Chairman, Wildlife Trust of India.
What are the major problems in the forest conservation, and we are unable to do it, and we are unable to bring it into the format of a policy?
I am of the belief that the loss of forest cannot really be compensated by money. This is an easy way out, and it was happening in my time when I was in the ministry and handling forest conservation. We are prepared to give you so much. It's part of the project cost. But have you seen a natural forest being grown by these plantations? I haven't. I have not walked in such forests. What is grown are monocultures, usually of exotic species, and I have had the occasion to see the compensatory afforestation of Narmada Valley being done in Kutch, some hundreds of kilometers away, and that too by growing Prosopis juliflora, which is a headache.
Supreme Court's CAMPA fund interim order allows governments to use a specialized fund for the conservation of forest. What is the usability and the usage status of that fund, sir?
So, you pay X amount of money, and therefore it's away from your conscience, and it facilitates government departments, including the forest department, to say we will allow you, but you pay so much. Yes. I think that has also led to, I mean, I'm talking about the basic concept of this CAMPA fund business. I am frankly not in favor. Then, having got some thousands of crores in the kitty, what have we done with them? They've lived there, they've improved the ways and means of financially of some forest departments, finance departments of state governments. But how far do they measure up to the ecological impact which they were meant for? I personally feel, yes, some afforestation has been done. It's wrong to generalize to that extent. It's done no work. It has, but not commensurate with the amount that we have accrued. Now, coming to this matter of its utilization, I frankly feel that perhaps the best use of CAMPA funds could be in the resettlement of people living within the forest.
Any activity which results in partly clearing up forest but is an activity towards afforestation and conservation and wildlife is exempted from the Forest Conservation Act. My question to you is, you just pointed out that there have been several clearances that have been granted by this new advisory committee set up under the Act. What exactly is it?
See, this Forest Advisory Committee has been constituted. Any proposal which goes to the central government is ultimately put to them.
Right.
And they give their recommendations. And there ought to be 3 experts, actually, people's representatives, who must really guide the proper kind of advice by the committee. I understand that now some representatives from the interested companies and somebody who is expert in EIA preparation, they have been taken in this particular committee. And as many as 80 projects have been granted clearance and diversion of 6,500 hectares of land.
My God.
But this is something which is, and there is a provision. What it says is that if there is no alternative possible, then this will be done. Now one doesn't know whether they really try to find out any alternative. Because there is so much of stress on land, they ultimately say, no, there is nothing available as far as the plain land is concerned. Therefore, the only alternate is to shift this forest area for the other purposes.
But the Act clearly says that land can't be transferred to corporates and institutions on companies and at no cost without approval.
That's correct, but
And the approval has come. They are going to companies.
Yes, these recommendations, they are going to companies. So ultimately the money, even CAMPA money, which he just now mentioned, huge amount, is being used for the purpose of companies only, making structures, roads, etc., not for the real purpose of conservation. And for the forest dwellers, this is what should happen, which was mentioned just now. But this is like now there's a devastation, there are fires which are taking place. But the CAMPA money has been used for protection and conservation of
Has there
forests.
been any CAMPA money used for fire fighting activity, forest fires?
Recently the fires which took place?
See, they work on their annual program. Now, for instance,
So they have their own program, their
yeah.
own agendas, and any emergency thing happening with the forest will
then
have to
it
be
goes
tackled
to
by
the
the forest
disaster
department.
management.
Disaster
Management.
management. So what is this 30,000 rupees doing sitting in the CAMPA authority?
What it is doing is, like because this
Being
fund doesn't
invested and
lapse,
generating more money.
that's why, they said you can put it in securities, like the law allows them to put it in securities, put them in. So many of I fear that some of the state governments may be using that to, balance their budgets, things like that, they are not looking at, afforestation, conservation. These are, I think, the last of the priorities of the governments.
You wanted to make a point on the buffer zones.
Yeah, like you're finding that like this every month we are seeing that at least 100 square kilometers is being given away. Right? On every month the Forest Advisory Committee meets. It's just sheerly giving away clearances. On one end, the forests are being encroached by this kind of non-forest activity. On the other end, you're expanding your national parks, tiger sanctuaries,
Buffer zones.
and their buffer zones. And now, recent Supreme Court judgment, it calls for call for creation of a buffer zone.
Yeah.
So everyone is randomly, announcing buffer zones. So where do people actually go? So if you don't have space for people, at one end you are encroaching with industry and mines, and at the other end you are saying, this is for animals.
Forest and animals.
And where do people go? So the entire lifestyle of the Adivasis, of people who are
Is being
living
lost.
is being completely lost.
On that note, thank you, sir, for joining us on this discussion and show. It's time for us to end the show. You can email your suggestions and comments to law.rstv@gmail.com. You can also watch our shows on the YouTube. We'll be back with a new issue and a new episode. Keep watching Raj Sabha TV.